You know, EVGA.
View count's going down.
Yeah, you're hurting my channel performance right now with your functioning power supply. We're gonna do another mostly unedited cut of testing a power supply today. This is an EVGA 750 GT. The reason we're doing this one is because in the Gigabyte power supply testing, where we showed how quickly it fails in an unedited shot, all one take of the power supply, we had a lot of requests that said, hey, can you show us what one looks like when it doesn't fail? And the answer is, there's not an explosion. But we're gonna show it anyway because it's probably useful for people to see in a lab environment, what does it look like? It shows that we're not being ridiculous or unrealistic in the way that we're testing things, because stuff can survive it. Power supplies that are well designed will not explode. So we're gonna be testing that. We're using this one in the box here. This is brand new. It's about $90 US, and that's pretty much all there is to it. We're gonna have one cut in the video here, and that's gonna be for the advertisement. Before that, this video is brought to you by Squarespace. We use Squarespace for our own GN store and juggle complex multi-piece orders all the time with it. Squarespace makes it fast for us to roll out new products with detailed pages full of galleries, videos, and descriptors. It's also useful for your own resume sites, for photographer or project portfolios, or for starting your new small business idea. There's never been a better time to try and start your new business than right now, and we can vouch that Squarespace makes it easy. Visit squarespace.com/gamersnexus to get 10% off your first purchase with Squarespace. Okay, so we're gonna take it in here and start the testing in our test lab. So we have Patrick Stone here is setting up the SM8800 and the SM220 along with the Variac, and we're gonna be, is it ready?
It is now.
Okay.
Just replaced the blown fuse from the last Gigabyte episode.
Let's show these. Do you wanna, I'll let you show them and explain what you were working on.
Yeah, so this is the first blown fuse from the previous Gigabyte testing, and then this one is from the last one. A little bit more explosive this time. I guess if we put them side by side, it's easier to tell. But man, that looks like the fuse popped in two different places and sort of plastered itself against the glass. Not good. Anyway, thankfully we've got a bunch of these that came with the unit, and we bought others in addition to that just in case, because, you know, hey, never can tell.
Yeah,
anyway,
those are designed to protect the testing equipment from the devices under test.
Exactly.
So Gigabyte, I don't know, how many have they've exploded several fuses for us now. 3.
Yeah, that's at least the third. It might have been the fourth.
Yeah, so a lot of fuses. Fortunately, so the SM8800 is the piece of equipment on the bottom, and fortunately, there are replaceable MOSFETs and things in there too, so we can keep it alive pretty easily. Exploding power supplies are always a hazard for test equipment. It gets very expensive very fast. If it's a catastrophic enough failure that it kills your testing machine, because a lot of the testing machines, you get into chromas and stuff like that, you're easily in the tens of thousands of dollars for the testing equipment alone. So you really don't want a power supply to kill it. So this is going to be the EVGA power supply. What is the full name of it? 750 GT?
EVGA 750 GT SuperNova.
SuperNova.
Yep.
So SuperNova line, it is 750 watts. It's the same wattage as the Gigabyte one.
Yeah, and it's a newer model. There's like a G2 and a G3. This is the GT, so if you guys are out there looking for this particular power supply, difference, you might be able to find this grate. Looks different. So,
right. And we are doing the same type of testing as we did last time. So we're mostly focusing on OPP. A couple things to be really clear on here is that there's a lot more to a power supply than overpower protection. We do a lot more testing than what you're seeing here, but this is the sort of unedited, or because this might take really long since it's probably not going to fail, the mostly unedited cut of how we do OPP testing. One aspect of a power supply review. Do you want to re-explain briefly kind of what you've just turned on and set up again?
Yeah, so as our source, we've got this Variac over here. It feeds into our two test units down here, the SM8800 and SM220. As I turned this SM220, or sorry, the SM8800 on, it tells me that I think I've got about 115 volts coming in, and then I've checked on the back of the power supply, flip the switch to the on position, and then in order to get things cranking, we just simply hit the PS on button over here. It sends the PS on signal to the power supply, and that, you'll see the fan just move it a little bit. It won't come on too much because we're only at 20% load.
Right.
And we'll leave this here for like a minute like we did last time. And within 59 seconds here, we'll be
able to get started.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Move on to the 60%.
Right. Some background information on the equipment. So when we first started looking into doing power supply reviews years ago, we've gotten more serious recently, but we're still pretty new to it. But when we first started looking at it, we received some training, hands-on training from Johnny Guru, formerly ran johnnyguru.com, the very, extremely well-respected power supply review website. Basically the only one anyone trusted for years. And Eris, running hardware busters, also cybernetics, and a couple of other things, is kind of like, has been the go-to, I think, power supply reviewer for quite a while now since John left johnnyguru.com. So this is equipment that we received training from him on when we first started. And Variac is rated pretty high. It can handle all this, and the SM8800 is
fully capable.
Oh yeah.
No problem there. Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and hit to the 60% load and give it about a minute there. And as we're doing that, you can see that the fan still hasn't turned on yet. It's just not enough load on this power supply to really matter. And from the 60% load, we're just going to jump to 100%. And then after about 10 seconds, I'm going to hit the 110, 120, 130, 140, 10-second interval.
Right.
And we'll see if it does anything different. My guess is it's going to shut down.
Yes, that is what it's supposed to do.
Yeah. That
the
would
Gigabyte
be,
one shut down.
Yeah. Hopefully we won't have that kind of trouble.
It shut down it won't turn back on.
Permanent over power protection?
That's what someone called it.
Yeah.
Permanent OPP. Yes, it is never at risk of another catastrophic failure. So.
Yeah. All right, so we are about 5 seconds to go here, and I'm going to jump to 100% load. And my guess is as soon as I do that, the fan will turn on. So here we go, hitting 100% load.
Yeah, and these fans, they'll turn on either based on a temperature sensor or based on a load percentage.
Yeah, and no fan yet.
It's
So
probably temperature.
yep, that's what I would go with right there. And that's about 10 seconds for me, so I'm going to go to 110%.
And the point of doing the percentages, let's answer this question from the audience. We'll go through a couple of these from last time. So one of the questions was functionally asking, so if the power supply, I'm going to pick some numbers, right? So let's say we have a 750 watt power supply and it can technically do 1,000 watts. So Stone, if the power supply can technically run at 1,000 watts without exploding, let's say maybe the true OPP is like 1,100 watts or whatever. If it can run at 1,000 watts, why would the manufacturer then not sell it as a 1,000 watt power supply instead of 750 with all this overhead? You want to try and explain that for the audience?
Okay, I just heard a click over here as soon as I went to 140%.
So we'll come back to that question.
Yeah,
Let's
okay.
talk about this first.
All right, yeah. And I'm just going to check on the voltage side of things, and if you look at this with the camera, you can see that the numbers are all dropping down now. So that the fan never did turn on,
right?
Which I'm not terribly worried about, because
No.
if it is temperature sensitive, then
They're normally 60 degrees Celsius. I don't know
Right.
if this specific one is.
Anyhow, as now the voltages are almost all the way dropped off, I'm going to go ahead and hit the power supply on signal to turn that off, and I'm going to turn the power supply off as well. So then the idea here is, here I am putting my hand on the.
Yes, people were nervous about that last time.
It's a lovely power supply. I just feel like okay, I'm not going to do that. But giving it a few seconds here, going back over here, going back down to the 20% load, 60% load. Sorry, looking at the currents. Those are the correct current numbers.
And it is not currently on, to be clear.
That's exactly
We're just
right.
looking at our settings for when it is on.
Yeah. So this unit is on. We're not sending the power supply on signal to the power supply yet. Power supply itself is in the off position. Going to turn it on now. Okay.
Still haven't told the power supply to turn on.
Exactly. All right.
And to just interject, the PS on switch you can kind of, in a sense, think of as the power button on your case.
Bingo. That's exactly right.
Same type of thing.
So here we go. Hey, Steve, it turned on.
Yes.
And if we look at the voltage numbers,
we do have voltage now, so we're not showing 0 anymore.
At 60% there,
and
voltage.
And do you want to show the wattage? We can show that too.
Absolutely right, yeah. So if we just tap this button here, you can see the wattage.
On each rail. So we've got a bunch of 12 volts. Why don't you point out the 5 and the 3s for everyone?
Yeah, so 12 volt, 12 volt, 5 volt, 12 volt, 12 volt, 12 volt, 3.3 volt, and 5 VSB.
Right, which is standby is the SB.
Mm-hmm. Yep. And
so it's working. It's at
doing its thing.
60%, right?
Yeah, no problems there.
And this, as a recap, you should definitely watch the Gigabyte Power Supply Explosion Speedrun if you haven't. It's a lot of fun. It's a really entertaining video, genuinely.
Yeah.
Normally being the one involved in making the videos, I don't necessarily find them entertaining after I filmed it, because I was just there. But I found this one particularly entertaining, so you should watch it. But yeah, so the Gigabyte power supplies would commonly fail in the process of trying to find the OPP trip point.
Mm-hmm.
And then the most recent one we tested, along with only one other one, failed at 60% after OPP.
Right, so we ramped it up.
Right.
And then it did
140.
trip. It did trip. And then we ramped it back up to find the exact OPP trip point.
Right.
And it tripped again. And then when we turned it back on at 60% load, that's when it popped.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So.
Do you want to go back to that the wattage question?
Yeah, let's go back to that question. And we'll do more of this too, just to show it can do it multiple times.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Because the Gigabyte one that we showed on camera, depending on how you count it, maybe survived twice.
Yeah.
I guess depends,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. If it explodes after the second or third time, does it count as surviving twice? I don't know. But, so we'll show some more of this in a second. But the question, to briefly recap, 750 watts, it can do 1,000 without exploding, and it's like, in air quotes, fine. Why does the manufacturer not say this is a 1,000 watt power supply?
So basically, what you want to do is you want the power supply's components to perform optimally. And in order to do that, you're going to design your board so that all the circuits inside are working within a range. As you go to, let's say, the top end of what the components could perform, then you start hitting a thing called derating. So this could be thermal derating or voltage derating. But basically, as you push the components to their extremes, they perform less effectively, and the lifetime of the components also is reduced. So if it's possible for all the components to produce 1,000 watts, that's great, but that also means that you may be reducing the lifetime of those components dramatically.
Right, and a lot of that's thermal, where with capacitors, I forget the name of the particular law, someone can post it in the comments, but there's a law, and not a legal one, but that scientific one, roughly every 10 degrees Celsius or so you get, I think it was like a halving of lifespan of the capacitors. We'll find that popped on the screen too. So temperature matters a lot for component lifespan. It matters a lot for the efficiency of the components. And there are other factors too, where the power supply manufacturer has to account for non-optimal usage scenarios. So things like dust buildup, which influences temperature, if they're trying to make sure they account for extended use. Actual extended use, not Gigabyte's definition of extended use, which is apparently less than 5 minutes. I have no further comment on that. But if they have to account for extended use or account for perhaps unclean power from the source, from the wall, maybe you're worrying about 100 volts in certain regions. You get significant drop or something. All of these things factor into how they ultimately define the spec. And a good manufacturer should be defining a spec that delivers as promised, rather than over-promising and then under certain conditions under-delivering or having catastrophic failure.
All right, so I think I'm ready to find that exact OPP trip point, because we know it tripped at 140. So I'm going to bring it back to 130, and I'm going to edge it up like we did the Gigabyte.
Right.
And my expectation is that it will power down again.
Right.
So we've got a fan running, which is good. That helps me, in addition to the audible click, to have some visual to see. So I'm going to jump it up to 100, give it, again, about 10 seconds or so, 100% now. And then from the 100%, after about 10 flashes, this hits at about 1 second per flash. And then I'm going to go to 110, give it about 10 seconds, make sure it's still holding that well. Just look at the voltage. Voltage looks fine. Go to 120. Okay. And I'm looking at the wattage there, looking at the voltages. There's my currents. Okay. I'm going to hit to 130. Okay, you can see my currents. Voltages are still holding at 130. Looking at my power output, I got about 980 watts coming out. And I am going to go back to my current, and I'm going to go over to my 5 volt rail, and I'm going to jump that up to about 10 amps, which is what we did with the Gigabyte power supply.
And the noise you all are hearing right now is our testing equipment.
Yep, the SM220.
Yep, so it's spinning up the fans, and this is a great time to answer another viewer question. We had someone ask, and they said maybe this is a dumb question, and perhaps contrary to that, it was actually one of the smartest questions in the entire chat. But they said maybe this is a dumb question. What happens to all of the watts that you are pulling through this machine? And the answer is in that fan that just turned on. All that noise, it turns into heat, and then it dumps it into the room, and that's about all there is to it. You know, if they put an ASIC in there and made it mine crypto, then this would be the most profitable possible testing we could do. Unfortunately, it's just heat waste.
Yeah.
Although I do have an idea, maybe I'll email Sun Moon and ask them if they can
Okay,
make
it
that.
just clicked again, and I bet if we look at the voltage, yep, we're dead
to
voltage. Yep. And turning the power supply off there, turning the power supply off here.
Roughly where were you? Were you keeping track?
Yeah, so if we switch back to the amp, you can see this tripped much lower than the other one. So I've got 15 on 3 rails. I was going toward 15 on the 4th rail. Sorry, that's not rails. 12 volt inputs. Outputs, 12 volt outputs.
Yeah.
Yeah, inputs to the machine, outputs from the power supply. And so I think the Gigabyte one failed at like 1545 on 3.
Right.
And it was at 1530 on the other 2.
Right.
We got video. You can check it out if you want to find out exactly.
By the way, for everyone, higher, it's not like higher is better in this scenario.
Good point.
It's successfully shuts down without explosion is better.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah.
That's all you want.
We expect overpower protection to protect your power supply and the components to which it is connected.
Right.
That's what we're after. And so again, this guy's been turned off. This guy's turned off. I'm going to drop back down to the 60% load. Here we go. All right, just to double check, everything's at 11 amps on my 12 volt connections, and 9 and 9 on 5, and 3.3 and 5 VSBs at 3 amps. And then I'm going to turn the power supply back on so you guys can see that. And then, oh, too fast, sorry about that. There you go. And then over here, I'm going to hit the power supply on button. And this is where it popped on the Gigabyte power supply, so we'll see.
Andrew, if you can give me a notice when we're at like 24 minutes.
Steve, it's just spinning like a working power supply.
That's weird.
Why would it do that?
I don't know. It's a lot.
This is not good for YouTube footage.
You know, EVGA.
View count's going down.
Yeah, you're hurting my channel performance right now with your functioning power supply.
I'm getting steady 12 volt numbers, Steve.
I don't like it.
Just,
Can we like pour some water on it or something to make it interesting?
Yeah, sparky, indeed.
Let's get the Gigabyte one next to it and face it into the EVGA one. Yeah, there you go. Perfect. I'll just explode one into the other and see if we can get a chain reaction.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know.
Oh, you know what? I made a mistake, Steve.
Did you?
I'm actually pulling 100% load on this thing.
Yeah.
I meant to pull 60, but I'm actually pulling more. And
Yeah.
guess what it's doing?
Working.
Just fine.
Yeah. So
I'll drop it down to 60.
So there's gonna be some people watching who are like, that sounds like a scripted joke. I actually don't know if it was, and I'm not gonna ask him to reveal it. I have no idea if that was planned or not. That worked really well. Do you want to do? Let's do this one more time. Let's just hit
Sure.
OPP again and turn it on, show it still works.
Yeah. So.
And let's. I'm feeling confident. Let's turn the power supply out so they can see the fan too.
Okay, right on. You got it. Yeah. So I'm gonna power supply off. Turn it off down here. Here we go, man. Bundles of cables.
What's our time like, Andrew? Oh wow, this is very efficient.
Okay, so beautiful grilling there.
Yeah,
Grilling.
it is a.
Grilling. All right. Anyway.
You could do that on the Gigabyte one.
So anyway, turning the power supply back on-off switch right there, back in the 1 position. And then going over here to the power supply, there's my PS on, fan spins up.
Load percentages.
Load percentage, if you look at the currents here, I'm at 60% load. You can see 6.5 amps on my 12 volt inputs. And then I'll jump to 100.
So 100%, 750 watts.
Yep, you can see voltage is holding just fine. And then power, 750 watts. And then 110%. Voltage still holding fine, 830 watts, looking over there. And go to 120%, up 900 watts. Voltage numbers, those are good looking voltage numbers too, actually, Steve.
Yeah.
Yeah, regulation's strong. And then as I go to 130%, still holding strong. And looking at that wattage, 980 watts coming out. And then this next one's got, this is where it should trip here. Sure enough.
So what was the trip point roughly you found for this?
So it was, my guess is that's going to be like 125% or so.
We'll put it on the screen when we have time to do the math. Right?
Exactly right, because it's just about doing the multiplication. You know, 15 point whatever times 3 plus 15 point whatever times 2, and then
other rails as well.
Exactly, and then you get your full power, and then you compare that to the base number, and there's your percentages.
Yeah, so at trip, I guess one last time is turn it on, show it doesn't explode when it turns on.
Yep.
So you're doing a full reset, everything turns off. PS symbol on, signals off.
Yeah, and you can see it's still got some residual power in there that'll just kind of soak its way out eventually.
Right.
And
I want to re-emphasize something quickly here in the reset too, which is that I said this already in the Gigabyte one, this is not our literal minute-for-minute testing process for power supply. That would be really nice. It'd be awesome. We'd do them all day long.
I'd be so fast.
Yeah, we would be testing faster than we could write. We do this just OPP. There's a lot more to look at, and even for just OPP, he's running through this faster than he would be normally. Normally, we have specific times we set where you're running a clock.
Exactly. I'm like watching a clock, literally pressing buttons based on clock timing, and
that way it's consistent, right? It's any methodology. You want run-to-run consistency.
Yep. There's
a known amount of time between each interval, and he also has a spreadsheet. He tracks everything in.
That's it. You got it. Yeah.
So this is like an intentionally haphazard approach that is sufficient to demonstrate without cuts if a power supply is going to explode or not from this particular testing.
You got it. So I'm going to turn this guy back on at 60% load after a third ramp up to overpower protection failure. Sorry, overpower protection trip, not failure.
Right.
And hit the power supply on button. Fan turns on. Looking over here, current numbers are correct for my 60% load.
Right.
And you can see it's not even hot anymore.
Yeah, and let's just prove that it is working.
12 volts.
Yeah.
5 volts, 3.3 volts, 5 VSB.
How about wattage?
And for the power, 754 watts.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
It's doing what it's supposed to do.
I actually don't know the answer to this. Why does it flash to 0? Is it showing another value in the bottom left?
No, I believe that. So this would be the power on the VJ connector, which is this third VGA connector down here.
Okay.
Yeah. So in order to show power there, and again, I had it on the 100% setting. I'm not very good at pressing the 100% setting apparently. Let me go back to 60%. There we go.
Right.
Yeah, 450. Yeah.
Yeah.
I did it again, Steve.
I mean, it's worse for it, and it's surviving.
It's still doing just fine.
Yeah, and this is also why I made the point of this isn't how we actually do the test, because we're a little more careful than that. But in this context, works great. So I think that pretty much proves the point on this is the expected behavior. Do you agree with that?
It is. Okay. It definitely is, yeah. And this is, I suppose this is a good power supply since we just got it. Maybe we'll do something with this one. Who knows?
Yeah, it literally just arrived. We bought a couple because people were requesting this. I overnighted them, and so it came out of the box, and there it is.
Yeah, that's another good point. Yeah, this is like fresh out the box for people that were asking for that.
And so was the other one, by the way. There was one comment that was like, Steve should have opened the Gigabyte one from the box to prove that it had never been used before. So even if I opened it from shrink wrap, like, those of you asking that, you do know we could re-shrink wrap it, right? Like, at some point, you just have to put trust in what you're watching. There's no way to I think we could go to the factory with Gigabyte. I would be happy to do this.
Yeah.
Go to the factory with Gigabyte. We'll stand next to one of their technicians, pull it off the line. We'll do the same test and see how it does. Gigabyte, it's an open invitation wherein I have invited myself to your factory. You are welcome to agree. I don't know. Do we want to? Maybe we can address a couple more questions. We can cut at any time at this point for since we've demonstrated it now. We don't need to.
Did you hit the spot where it was like, oh, so now I'm just going to buy EVGA power supplies?
Oh no, we haven't talked with that. So there were a lot of comments. Well, there are a couple brands. Seasonic was specifically always mentioned.
Yeah.
A lot of comments.
Okay, Seasonic's not bad, right?
It's kind of like Noctua, where it's like reputation's good. They're not magic, but the reputation's good. But it's good to the point where people start thinking it is magic. And so a lot of comments I saw were like, this is why I only buy Seasonic.
Yeah.
And as a reviewer, this is something we used to say a lot, and we should probably reemphasize. That is a generally bad mentality for just about any product, including ours, by the way, like our videos. You should look at every video from us or every product from a manufacturer almost in a vacuum. Obviously, you contextualize their past for things like RMA, warranty support, what their ethos is as a company.
How do they treat their customers?
Right. But at a product level, Seasonic is fully capable of producing a bad power supply. So it is a little bit dangerous to just basically go to Amazon Newegg, type in 750 watts, and then filter for Seasonic, and then buy one.
Yeah, and so this is probably going to be unpopular. Gigabyte could produce a good power supply.
What?
Right. One of the very first things you said in the very first video was that the AP series, just fine. We use it in our test bench.
At some point, you do go, it seems like Seasonic has a lot more hits than misses.
Right.
So statistically, it's probably safer to trust certain companies, but they're all capable of making a bad power supply.
Yeah.
So just keep that in mind. So just generally kind of go product by product for those types of things.
Yeah. And I would add on to that, there's a reason that review outlets exist.
Yes.
We want you guys to be able to, as much as possible, again, there's no way to infinitely review every single product, but as much as possible, go look at the reviews, wait on the reviews, and then use the data from the reviews to make your own decisions on the products, not just on the company.
And same thing there too, where there's a lot of good reviewers out there for things like GPUs, CPUs, cases.
Yeah.
So power supply is not as many good ones, but there's still good reviewers. So other just general advice is kind of check out a couple reviews and aggregate the data for yourself. Put your own spin on what you've consumed from different people, and don't necessarily just rely on one reviewer, because these products are all very complex, and we're not going to test every single aspect of every product, and neither is the other reviewer or whoever it might be, by the way. So it always helps to have multiple angles because people test it differently.
One day, Gamers Nexus will have a complete and thorough review process
for
every product in a computer.
No, every product, period.
Ever.
I'm reviewing Earth. That's my end game. Reviewing planet Earth. So that's going to be it for this one. The power supply has been running this whole time. The load tester shows it at 100% load, right? Fan is just turned back on. And power supply survived. Did you count how many it survived? Like 4 or something?
3 different OPP.
3-ish? Okay.
Yeah.
So more than any of the Gigabyte ones that failed did. And hopefully that sort of gives some context to what it's supposed to do. Hopefully it was somewhat educational. And we will continue doing more of these. There's been a lot of requests for reviewing an actually good power supply in full. We'll do one of those at some point. But otherwise, I think that addresses the main request, which was, what does it look like when it doesn't fail? It's not spectacular.
No.
But that's what you want, is a not spectacular power supply in your computer.
It just works.
Yeah, it just works. Where's Jensen Huan? We need him. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. As always, you can subscribe for more. Go check out the Gigabyte series. It'll be linked in the description below. It should be a lot of fun for you. And you can go to store.gamersnexus.net to support us. Grab one of our shirts, mouse mats, mod mats, or other items. And you can go to patreon.com/gamersnexus for behind-the-scenes videos, many of which he has hosted on power supply testing. So thanks for watching. We'll see you all next time.